Before the eyes of 125 million Americans watching live, Jasmine Crockett ignited the unthinkable, unmasking Donald Trump not as a president, but as a mafia godfather who hijacked the Justice Department to build his own criminal empire. The Capitol chamber shook with chaos, gasps, screams, senators pounding their desks in rage as for decades of corruption exploded into the light. This was no longer politics, it was the very survival of American democracy, hanging by a thread before a stunned nation. That as Jasmine dropped the final, devastating twist, one question silenced the room: would the so-called boss of bosses finally crumble or drag 330 million Americans into the abyss with him? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The broadcast did not ease in, it detonated. One gavel strike, sharp as a gunshot, and the entire chamber fell into a silence so thick it seemed to press against the walls of Capitol Hill. At the center, Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. Her voice, steady but scorching, cut through the silence with surgical precision. "You are not a president, Donald Trump. You are a mafia boss in disguise." The words didn't just echo inside the chamber, they tore through the screens of 125 million Americans watching live. Gasps broke out, some senators stiffened in their seats, eyes darting nervously. Others clenched fists or whispered frantically to aides. Across the country, living rooms and bars went dead quiet, breath held as if the nation itself had been slapped across the face. Trump's reaction was immediate, volcanic. He shot up from his seat, face flushed crimson, his fist hammering against the desk. "Weak, irrelevant," he bellowed, voice cracking under the strain. "That's all you are, Jasmine. Just another angry mouth-making nose." The chamber trembled with his fury, but the cameras caught the subtle tremor in his hand, the bead of sweat rolling at his temple. For millions watching, that flicker of fear was louder than his roar. Jasmine did not blink, her eyes locked on him, dark and unyielding, the eyes of a woman who had walked through storms far greater than his insults. She leaned in, her tone dropping into steel. "If I am nose, Mr. Trump, then why does your empire collapse every time I speak?" The air inside the chamber thickened, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed in so tight you could see the twitch at the corner of Trump's mouth. Outside the Capitol, chants thundered from protesters echoing against the marble. "Mafia! Mafia! Mafia!" Their voices surged through the broadcast feed, bleeding into millions of homes. Inside, senators shifted uneasily. Some stared at Trump with unease, others at Jasmine with something closer to awe. In that moment, she was no longer just a congresswoman. She was a mirror held up to power itself, a voice for every citizen crushed beneath corruption, every community silenced by fear. Trump sneered, trying to claw back control, but his words stumbled. You think you can break me?" His growl was low, desperate, but the cameras betrayed him. His jaw clenched, his eyes darted, his chest heaved with shallow breaths. He wasn't untouchable, he wasn't invincible, he was cornered. Jasmine tilted her head, the faintest shadow of a smile playing on her lips, not of arrogance, but of certainty. She had drawn blood, and everyone in that chamber knew it. For 20 endless seconds, Trump stood frozen, rage bowling but words absent, while the entire nation sat on edge, waiting for the next blow. And as the camera panned between them, her unshaken fire against his unraveling mask, the question seared into every viewer's mind, unspoken but undeniable. What happens when a woman dares to strip a self-proclaimed king of his crown? Live before the eyes of America. The chamber is still trembling when Jasmine lifts a thin, yellowed folder and holds it high for the cameras. Her voice lowers, steady as a judge's gavel. "This isn't the first time Donald Trump has bowed to power. Let's go back to New York, 1979. The screens flicker with old photographs, men in trench coats, concrete skeletons of skyscrapers, Union picket lines wrapped around the city like chains. John Cody," Jasmine continues, "the mob-linked union boss of Teamsters Local 282, brought the city to its knees. Every site was shut down, every crane was frozen midair. Every worker walked off except at one place. One shining tower that refused to go dark, Trump Tower." The words hang heavy in the air. Senators shift in their seats, the public leans closer, and the camera zooms tight on Trump's stone face. A recorded voice begins to play. Michael Cody, son of the notorious union boss, his words echoing like testimony from a ghost. Trump talked tough, but when my father pushed, he broke. He begged for work to continue. He learned quick if you don't listen, you get crushed. The room stirs with whispers. Jasmine drives the knife deeper. This is who he was, not a fighter, not a leader. A man who learned to kneel before gangsters, then decided to copy them. The flashback sharpens. Trump, just 33, pacing nervously inside his half-built tower. Cody demands apartments for his mistress, a pool carved out of concrete, contracts for mob-controlled crews. Trump protests weakly, then folds, signing deals he swore he'd never touch. Michael Cody's voice cracks through again. He'd bluster like a big man, but when Dad pressed, he cried like a kid. My father crushed him every single time. The audience at home feels the weight of it. The future president of the United States, learning his first lesson in raw power, not from the Constitution, not from democracy, but from the Mafia. The chamber is suffocating now. Reporters trade frantic glances, pens racing, as Jasmine's words carve a chilling picture. America's justice, poisoned at its roots. She looks straight into the camera, her tone sharpening. This is not just Trump's story, it is the story of how corruption seeps into concrete, how it grows with steel and glass, how it builds monuments to greed that tower over truth. America's justice system was built on fear of mobsters, and Donald Trump learned to become one of them. A silence stretches across the chamber, heavy and unrelenting, until Jasmine closes the folder with a snap that sounds like a verdict. Every viewer feels the same question ignite in their chest. If a man who once knelt to the Mafia now holds the power of a nation, what kind of justice can America possibly expect? Trump slams both palms onto the table, his chair screeching backwards as he rises, trembling with fury. His voice shatters the chamber's silence like breaking glass. I never kneeled before anyone, he roars, spit catching the light under the cameras. His chest heaves, his eyes bloodshot, veins pulsing at his temples. The fury feels rehearsed, but beneath it, millions watching sense the stench of panic. Jasmine doesn't flinch, she steps forward, folder in hand, and with a sharp crack slams it down on the desk. The sound ricochets like a gunshot, pages scatter across the table. Union contracts, photographs, testimonies signed and dated. Her voice cuts through Trump's bellow like steel tearing cloth. Then explain this. Cody's sworn testimony, union payoffs. Mob-controlled contractors building your precious tower while you beg for the strikes to stop. Gasps ripple through the chamber. A senator covers his mouth. Reporters lean so far forward they nearly tumble from their seats. On the split-screen broadcast, the nation sees two images side by side. Jasmine's piercing glare, and Trump's face draining of color. His lips twitch but no words come. For a man whose weapon was always his voice, silence is the deadliest confession. Jasmine presses harder, her tone relentless. John Cody owned your tower before you did. His men chose your contractors. His mistress lived in your apartments. His demands became your orders. And you dare stand here and say you never kneeled. You didn't just kneel, Mr. Trump. You learned. You learned the Mafia's way: threaten, extort, silence, control. Trump's jaw works furiously, but his microphone captures only a ragged breath. The cameras catch every detail, the bead of sweat breaking loose and rolling down his cheek, the tightening of his fists, the frantic blink of a man trying to swallow his past before the world devours him whole. Outside, chants of Mafia, Mafia, thunder louder, seeping through the marble walls, rattling the chamber like drums of judgment. The tension is unbearable now, the room bowling with disbelief, anger, and awe. Aides whisper frantically, senators pound their fists, and reporters scratch headlines that will define the next century. Trump opens his mouth, closes it, opens again. Nothing. 20 seconds of silence stretch into eternity. The cameras locked on his face, America staring into the eyes of a man stripped bare before the law he once commanded. Jasmine does not shout. She lowers her voice to a razor's whisper, the kind that slices deeper than any scream. This is the truth of your beginning, so tell America. If this is who you were when you built your first tower, what monster have you become with the full power of the presidency in your hands? The chamber trembles with the weight of the question. And across the nation, millions sit frozen, knowing this confrontation is only the beginning of an even darker reckoning yet to come. The silence from Trump's lips still hangs like smoke when Jasmine strikes again, this time with a scalpel sharpened by another senator's words. She lifts a printed excerpt, her voice ringing clear. Senator Sheldon, White House called your Department of Justice exactly what it was. Equal parts gangster and gone show. The chamber erupts. Some senators shake their heads in shame, others mutter furiously, but the cameras catch every flinch. Jasmine presses forward. Under your watch, the DOJ wasn't the Department of Justice. It was the Department of Trump. Every order that left your mouth became law, every whim became policy, and every obstacle was crushed. She pivots sharply, eyes narrowing on the name written in bold across the page. And at the center of it all, Pam Bondi, your so-called Attorney General. A puppet with strings pulled straight from this chamber, dancing only when you demanded it. Screens flash images of Bondi, smiling beside Trump, headlines scrolling. Ad defends Trump at every turn. Bondi accused of shielding Epstein files, career prosecutors forced out in purge. Jasmine's voice cuts through the nose like a dagger. Her own chief of staff admitted it. We get to do everything the president wants us to do, not the law. Not the Constitution. You, Donald J. Trump. One man's word became the DOJ's command. The audience across America explodes. On Twitter, hashtags ignite, hashtag Mafia Justice, hashtag DOJ corrupted, hashtag Bondi puppet. In living rooms, parents shake their heads, veterans slam their fists on tables, young people shout at screens. How is this justice? The outrage builds like a storm, rattling every corner of the nation. Inside the chamber, Trump's jaw tightens. He glares at Jasmine, but she doesn't blink. Her tone sharpens, slicing each word with surgical cruelty. When the Mafia takes over a city, they bleed it dry. When you took over the Justice Department, you bled democracy. Judges stopped trusting their prosecutors, citizens stopped trusting their courts. And the law itself became nothing more than a shield for your crimes and a weapon for your enemies. Detention is unbearable. Senators fidget, aides whisper, cameras zoom in so close viewers can see the tremor in Trump's hand as he grips the edge of the desk. Jasmine leans forward, her voice dropping into a low, deadly calm. Gangster and gone show, that is what you built. A mafia circus, draped in the seal of the United States, and you dare call it justice? The chamber is electric, buzzing with rage and disbelief. Outside, chants roar louder. No Mafia president. The Capitol shakes as though the walls themselves are ready to crack. And across the country, one chilling realization seizes the audience like a vice. If the nation's highest court of law can be turned into a mobster's plaything, then what piece of America will be left to save? Jasmine doesn't give Trump a second to recover. She pivots, lifting another stack of papers, and the words fall like hammers. Columbia University, Harvard University, two of the most powerful academic institutions in the world brought to their knees by your demands. They gave you policy concessions, they gave you silence, and when that wasn't enough, you demanded cash, hundreds of millions of dollars. And they paid. The room stirs violently. Senators murmur, reporters gasp. The chamber feels like it is tilting on its axis. Jasmine slams down another document, the camera zooming tight on the bold numbers. $200 million. This is not negotiation. This is not leadership. This is extortion, plain and simple. She doesn't wait for Trump to speak. She doesn't need to. She twists the knife deeper. Apple, she announces, her voice crackling through the microphones. Tim Cook walked into the Oval Office and walked out promising $100 billion in new investments because you told him to. Because you held the American economy hostage until Apple bowed. She lifts her eyes from the page, her stare drilling straight into Trump's, and Intel, one of the world's most powerful chip manufacturers. They didn't just agree to your terms, they gave up 10% of their company, handed over like tribute to a crime boss. The chamber explodes in disbelief, senators pound fists on desks, aides cover their mouths, reporters scramble to push breaking alerts across every network. Outside, chants rise higher, carried on the whine. Extortion, extortion. Inside, Trump's face twists into something between rage and panic. The camera is catching every twitch, every bead of sweat. He grips the desk so hard his knuckles bleach white. Jasmine leans forward, her voice low and lethal. You don't negotiate, Mr. Trump, you extort. You turn the most respected institutions of this country into your hostages. You use fear as currency, You sell intimidation as policy. And now, America sees it for what it is. Her words hang in the air like smoke, suffocating and undeniable. Trump finally moves, slamming a hand against the desk. His mouth opens, his jaw trembles, but no words come. The cameras drink in his silence, magnified across millions of screens. For a man who built his empire on swagger and dominance, that silence feels like collapse. The chamber is bowling, the tension unbearable, as if one more word might ignite a riot inside the room. Viewers at home clutch the arms of their chairs, unable to look away, waiting for the explosion they know is coming. And Jasmine drives the point home, her voice cracking like a whip. So tell us, Mr. Trump, if universities, if CEOs, if billion-dollar corporations all bent to your threats, what chance does American democracy have of standing tall against you? The echo of Jasmine's words hasn't even faded when the sound outside the Capitol swells into a roar. Through the thick marble walls, the chant is unmistakable, thousands of voices pounding in unison. Mafia! 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 The sound seeps into the chamber like a drumbeat of judgment, shaking the floor, rattling nerves, and drowning out every whisper. On television screens across the country, networks break away from split screens to broadcast the chaos outside. Protesters host signs painted in blood-red letters. No Mafia president, justice, not extortion, Trump equals gangster. Helicopters whirl overhead, capturing a sea of bodies flooding the Capitol steps. Anchors narrate in disbelief as polls flash across the screen. 46% of Americans calling Trump a criminal, 44% still defending him. The nation split like glass under a hammer. Fear and rage pour across social media. Hashtag surging. Hashtag Mafia president. Hashtag Crockett vs. Trump. Hashtag save democracy. Inside, the atmosphere is combustible. Senators whisper furiously. Reporters' fingers fly across keyboards, and every camera zooms tighter on Trump. He seats, lips curled, his face a mask of rage. Finally, he lashes out, his voice trembling with venom. You're nothing, Jasmine, a minor congresswoman, a nobody. His words drip with contempt, but his tone betrays desperation. For the first time, the so-called king of dominance sounds small, cornered. Jasmine doesn't blink. She lets the insult hang in the air, lets the cameras drink in Trump's sneer, then steps forward, her voice steady, rising above the storm. If I'm nothing, then why does every truth I speak send your empire into chaos? Why does one so-called nobody hold the power to bring thousands into these streets and force millions of Americans to see who you really are? The room stills, the silence carved sharp by her words. The broadcast cuts between the chamber and the crowd outside. Protesters scream her name. Commentators shake their heads, admitting live on air that they have never seen a single voice destabilize a president so completely. In living rooms, viewers lean forward, caught between awe and dread. On the streets, people raise their phones high, recording every second, their voices fusing with Jasmine's like a single chorus of defiance. Trump slams the desk again, but this time it doesn't thunder, it echoes hollow, like a man pounding on the walls of his own cage. His eyes dart, his jaw tightens, but his words are weak, swallowed by the chants reverberating through the Capitol. Jasmine straightens, the weight of history pressing on her shoulders, and delivers her line not just to Trump, but to every American watching. So tell me, Mr. Trump, if a so-called minor congresswoman can strip the mask from the self-proclaimed boss of America, then what else can the truth destroy? The chamber trembles, the nation holds its breath, and for the first time in decades, the empire of fear looks ready to crack. The chants outside still thunder. Mafia! Mafia! When Trump suddenly lunges forward, gripping the microphone with white knuckles. His face is flushed, his lips curled back into a sneer. The cameras zoom close, capturing every twitch, every bead of sweat as he leans in and spits venom. You're nothing but another angry black woman shouting in the dark. The words hang in the air like poison. The chamber gasps as one audible, raw, as though the entire room has been punched in the gut. A senator's jaw drops, or reporter's pen slips from her fingers. Even the protesters outside falter for a moment, their chants stuttering into silence as the weight of his words bleeds through the marble walls. On millions of television screens, viewers recoil, some covering their mouths, others shouting in fury at the man who just weaponized race and gender in front of the nation. Jasmine freezes, just for a heartbeat, her shoulders stiffen, her eyes flash, but her lips remain closed. In that sliver of silence, the world sees the cruel strategy behind Trump's assault aimed not at her argument, but at her very identity. It is a blow meant to wound deeper than politics, to drag her into a pit where his cruelty thrives. Trump straightens, emboldened, his voice growing louder, uglier. You don't matter, your district doesn't matter. You're not a leader, Jasmine, you're a sideshow. And without me, you wouldn't even be on this stage. Look at you, you've turned this chamber into your circus, and the whole country is laughing at you. The chamber boils, not with applause but with outrage. Senators shout over each other, some calling for order, others burying their faces in shame. The camera pans to Jasmine, her eyes locked on Trump, unblinking, but her jaw clenched so tight it looks as if she's holding back an earthquake. Across America, social media erupts, timelines flooding with fury. Hashtag racist president, hashtag stand with Jasmine, hashtag mafia thug. Celebrities, activists, and ordinary citizens tweet in real time. Did he really just say that? Live, to her face. Trump presses on, feeding off the chaos, his voice now a growl. You think you're some kind of hero? You're not, you're a pawn, a mouthpiece for radicals. And when this is over, Jasmine, no one will even remember your name. The cameras zoom in, capturing his sneer as if he has already won, as if his insult has cut her down to size. But the silence that follows isn't victory, it's the storm before something greater. Jasmine finally exhales, her chest rising slow and steady, her eyes still fixed on him with fire that no insult can extinguish. She doesn't answer yet, she doesn't need to. The entire chamber feels the weight of her restraint, the tremor of her fury held like a blade behind her teeth. Outside, the chants roar back to life, louder than before, drowning out Trump's last insult. And in that electric pause, the question grips every viewer across the nation. After a strike this cruel, will Jasmine falter or will she rise and turn Trump's weapon back against him in front of the whole world? For a moment, the insult lingers like smoke in the chamber. The cameras hold on Jasmine's face, waiting, searching for the crack Trump so desperately wanted to expose. But instead of breaking, she breathes slow, deliberate, steady. Her shoulders rise, then fall, her eyes narrow, sharp as a blade pulled clean from its sheath. When she finally speaks, her voice is calm, but it carries the weight of a hammer. When they go low, I go for the truth. The chamber tightens, every ear bends toward her. She begins to recite names, not as words, but as indictments. Ghislaine Maxwell, your operative, sat with her, not to seek justice, but to protect secrets. Todd Blanche, your fixer, your so-called lawyer, sent to silence and suborn perjury on your behalf. Emil Bo, the thug in a suit, promoted to the Third Circuit as though American, Edith, another gangster in robes. Gasps ripple through the crowd. These are not conspiracy theories, whisper in corners. These are names tied to evidence, names that hang heavy with the stench of corruption. Trump's jaw tightens, but his silence betrays him. The cameras catch his eyes flicking side to side, as though searching for an escape route in a chamber that has none. Jasmine presses on, her tone cutting deeper with each word. This isn't just mismanagement. This is not politics as usual. This is organized crime under the mask of democracy. The Department of Justice turned into the Department of Trump. The weight of her words crushed the chamber. Senators shift uncomfortably, some bowing their heads, others pounding their fists in anger. Reporters can barely keep pace, headlines already splashing across screens. Crockett names Maxwell, Blanche, Goindode shocker. Outside, the chants grow louder, faster, their rhythm fusing with Jasmine's words as if the streets themselves are answering her. Her voice wavers only once, not from weakness, but from the gravity of what she is laying bare. When judges cannot trust their prosecutors, when truth is bent to shield predators, when fear sits higher than justice in the scales of law, that is when democracy begins to rot. For a heartbeat, despair grips the chamber, a heavy reminder of how far the rot has spread. But Jasmine's fire doesn't die there, it grows. She straightens, her voice lifting, fueled not just by anger but by resolve. And yet here we stand, not broken, not silenced. Because every time you tried to bury the truth, it clawed its way back up. And tonight, it is here, in this chamber, for all of America to see. The crowd outside surges again, the chants shaking windows, the air electric. Trump leans forward, his mouth twitching, but no words come. He is not in control anymore. She is. The camera lingers on her, a single figure blazing against the storm. And as millions watch, the question crashes into their minds with the force of inevitability. If one woman's truth can pierce through the armor of a president, what will happen when the floodgates of justice finally break wide open? Jasmine doesn't let the silence stretch long. She pivots from Trump's shattered defenses and turns toward the cameras, her gaze fixed not just on the senators before her, but on the millions of Americans watching from living rooms, kitchens, and hospital waiting rooms. Her voice drops lower, softer, yet it cuts sharper than any scream. This isn't about me. This is about you. About the people this system has failed while Donald Trump built an empire of fear. The chamber quiets, even Trump, mid-snarl, halts as if sensing the ground shifting beneath him. Jasmine's tone deepens, weaving pain with resolve. I speak for the mothers ripped from their children at the border, children deported while clutching hospital bracelets on their tiny wrists. I speak for workers laid off so billionaires could grow richer, their pensions stolen, their dignity trampled. I speak for whistleblowers who tried to warn us, who were silenced, blacklisted, destroyed because they dared expose the rot. Gasps ripple through the gallery. A senator wipes her eyes. On the screens at home, parents grip their children tighter. Veterans lean forward in grim recognition, and activists live tweet Jasmine's words in real time. The stories sting because they are not abstractions, they are wounds still bleeding in the fabric of the nation. Jasmine presses on, her voice trembling only with conviction. Every time a family was broken, every time a truth teller was silenced, every time justice was twisted to serve one man's power, America itself bent lower. This isn't just extortion, it is betrayal. And every citizen betrayed is another brick pulled from the foundation of our democracy. Trump shifts uncomfortably, his face locked in a sneer, but his silence betrays him. Jasmine's words now bypass him completely. She isn't speaking to him, she's speaking over him, beyond him, directly into the soul of the nation. Her eyes glisten, but her voice sharpens, slicing through the chamber. I don't stand here for titles or cameras. I stand for the nurse working double shifts who can't afford her own medicine. I stand for the single mother evicted while billionaires buy penthouses. I stand for every community told they are too small, too powerless, too irrelevant to matter. Because I know the truth. When the law bows to one man, no one is safe, not you, not me, not your children. The chamber holds its breath. Protesters outside pick up her words, repeating them in unison, their chant growing into a deafening wave that shakes the Capitol windows. Reporters pause their typing, staring, realizing they are witnessing something that will be etched into history books. And as Jasmine grips the microphone tighter, her final words slice through the chaos with surgical precision, echoing across America. So I ask you, how long can a nation survive when its laws kneel before one man, and one man alone? The chamber still vibrates with Jasmine's last words, and another voice rises, calm but searing. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse leans into his microphone, his tone grave, his eyes fixed on the panel before him. This is not just opinion. This is fact. Federal judges no longer trust the Department of Justice under Donald Trump. His words land like cannon fire. The room stiffens, even the air seems to freeze. The cameras cut instantly to the judges seated along the back wall. Their faces are carved in stone, frowns deepening, lips tightening, heads shaking slowly, almost in disbelief. The broadcast beams their expressions across the nation, and viewers at home see what no one expected, not just partisan outrage, but the judiciary itself recoiling from a president's Department of Justice. Whitehouse presses further, his voice steady but sharp as glass. Day after day, prosecutors walk into federal courts carrying cases tainted with political interference. Judges who once relied on their word now brace themselves for lies, for manipulation, for abuse of power. The Department of Justice has not been a guardian of the law, it has been the muscle of a gangster. Gasps echo through the gallery, reporters scramble to keep up, pens racing, cameras clicking in rapid bursts. Social media ignites again. Hashtag judges don single quotes to trust DOJ, hashtag Trump crime family. The crowd outside picks up the rhythm, chanting louder, their voices shaking the Capitol steps. Then comes the eruption. Trump slams both fists on the desk, his face exploding red, veins bulging across his temples. His voice booms, cracking with rage. Lies, all of it. Fake judges, fake news, Fake senators. You're all traitors, every one of you. He points at White House, then at Jasmine, his hand shaking violently. You think you can destroy me with your stories? You think America believes you? No, they believe me. They've always believed me. But the cameras don't lie. They capture every bead of sweat, every twitch of desperation, every jagged breath torn from his chest, and worse, the judges don't move. They don't defend him. They don't nod. They sit in stony silence, their disapproval louder than any shout. Jasmine leans back slightly, her eyes locked on Trump, her expression unflinching. White House doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His final words land like a verdict. If the courts no longer trust the Department of Justice, Mr. Trump, then America no longer has justice at all. And that is the legacy you carry. The chamber erupts in chaos, senators shouting, aides scrambling, protesters outside pounding their fists against barricades. But over the nose, one thought sears itself into the mind of every American watching. If even the judges have turned against Trump, then how much longer can his empire of fear hold before it collapses under its own corruption? The chamber is chaos, judges frowning, senators shouting, aides scurrying like sparks across a wildfire. In the middle of it, Trump explodes, his voice rattling the microphones, fists slamming against the desk. This is my country. You don't tell me what justice is. I am justice. His face is purple with rage, spit flying, veins bulging as though they might burst. Jasmine rises slowly, her chair scraping back with a sound like steel against stone. She doesn't shout at first. She waits, letting his rage burn itself loud and raw, until the only sound left is his ragged breath. Then her voice slices through the chamber, sharp, surgical, unyielding. You are not a president. You are a mobster in a suit. The impact is immediate. The chamber erupts, gasps colliding with cheers, the crowd outside catching her words through the loudspeakers and chanting them back in unison. Mobster in a suit, mobster in a suit. The Capitol trembles with the rhythm of their voices. Trump snarls, leaning across the desk like a cornered beast. How dare you? I built towers higher than you'll ever climb. I've commanded armies of lawyers, armies of CEOs, armies of politicians who bowed to me. His voice breaks into a growl. And you're nothing. A single congresswoman with a big mouth. Jasmine doesn't blink. She takes a step forward, closing the gap until the two stand nearly face to face under the glare of the cameras. Her tone hardens, fueled not by fury but by conviction that burns deeper than rage. Armies, you call them armies, they were cowards. They were men who knelt because they feared you. But fear isn't loyalty. Mr. Trump hit slavery. And America will never again kneel to you. The crowd roars like a wave crashing against stone. Protesters outside scream her name. Reporters' fingers blur across keyboards. News anchors stumble over their words as history unfolds in real time. Trump's face twists, his jaw clenched so tight it trembles. He bellows, voice cracking, I made America rich. I made it powerful. Without me, this country is nothing. Jasmine's voice cuts across his like thunder splitting the sky. Jasmine's voice cuts across his like thunder splitting the sky. Without you, this country is free. Without you, justice can breathe again. Without you, America remembers who it belongs to, the people, not the mob. The roar from the chamber and the streets outside fuses into one, shaking the walls, rattling the cameras, overwhelming even Trump's fury. For the first time, the balance of power tilts. Trump, still shouting, looks less like a leader and more like a man unraveling under the weight of his own delusions. Jasmine, standing tall, looks not just like a congresswoman but like a shield for the millions watching, the millions chanting, the millions hoping. And as the cameras freeze frame on the clash, his rage against her resolve, the question burns through the nation. If a mobster in a suit can be unmasked before the world, is this the moment America finally breaks free from his grip? The roar inside the chamber bleeds into the streets outside, where the crowd has swelled into the tens of thousands. From every angle, Capitol steps, surrounding parks, rooftops, the chant surges like thunder. No Mafia president, no Mafia president. Hand-painted signs wave above the sea of bodies, red and black letters burning against the sky. Justice, not fear. America will not kneel. Helicopter spotlights sweep over the march, illuminating faces streaked with sweat and tears, fists pumping in rhythm with the words that now feel like a national verdict. Television screens split between Jasmine standing tall in the chamber and the masses outside. News anchors stumble over their words, voices cracking as they try to keep pace with the chaos. We are witnessing something unprecedented, one mutters, almost breathless. Another chimes in. This is no longer a hearing, this is a revolution on live television. On social media, the hashtags ignite like wildfire. Hashtag no Mafia president. Hashtag Crockett vs Trump. Hashtag democracy on trial. Within minutes, millions of posts flood timelines. Videos of Jasmine's line, "You are a mobster in a suit," go viral, played, clipped, remixed, and share until her words echo across every screen in America. But hope doesn't come without dread. Alongside celebration, fear coils tight. Analysts appear on split-screen panels, warning grimly, Trump still holds immense influence, his loyalists control key positions. The machinery of power, still in his grip, the ticker at the bottom of the screen flashes poll numbers swinging wildly, approval ratings for Trump plunging, but warnings of unrest among his base rising like storm clouds. Inside the chamber, Jasmine glances briefly toward the cameras, and though she says nothing, her silence feels like a pact with the people outside. Protesters shout her name. In union halls, classrooms, church basements, and crowded bars, ordinary Americans nod along, tears in their eyes, fists clenched. For the first time in years, they feel like someone is speaking directly for them. Yet tension gnaws at the edges because the people know too well that speaking truth is one thing, but forcing the powerful to yield is another battle altogether. Trump sits slumped in his chair now, his chest still heaving, his eyes flicking with panic as he sees the headlines crawling across the monitors. But even weakened, he is not finished. His fingers drum against the table like a war drum, as if already plotting his next counterstrike. The nation senses it. Hope rises, but so does suspense, the knowledge that men like him rarely go down quietly. The camera lingers on Jasmine, her figure framed against the chaos, a symbol of defiance and fragile hope. And across the nation, one chilling question takes root in every mind, lingering like a storm cloud on the horizon. If truth can shake the streets, but power is still clenched in the hands of the Mafia, will justice ever truly prevail? The chamber freezes as Jasmine Crockett reaches beneath her desk and lifts a slim black binder, its cover stamped with 3 words in stark, blood-red ink, Doge-sealed files. Cameras zoom in instantly, lenses trembling as though even the machines know the gravity of what's about to happen. The crowd outside erupts again, but this time the noise doesn't reach the room. Inside, there is only silence and air so heavy it feels like oxygen has been sucked out of the Capitol itself. Jasmine doesn't speak at first. She lets the binder sit on the polished oak, her hand resting lightly on its surface as if steadying a weapon too powerful to wield recklessly. Then, with eyes locked on Trump, she says, "These are internal Department of Justice memos, files deliberately buried, suppressed, hidden from the American people. They don't just mention Jeffrey Epstein. They mention you, Mr. Trump." Gasps ripple through the chamber like an earthquake. Senators shift in their seats, reporters scratch furiously, and even the marble walls seem to absorb the shock. Trump leans forward, his knuckles white against the table, his jaw trembling. For the first time tonight, his bluster falters. The man who had shouted, insulted, and deflected now looks as if the ground beneath him is cracking open. Jasmine flips the first page. On screen, the cameras capture a DOJ memo dated 2002. It details a decision not to pursue charges against Epstein after a phone call from higher office. Jasmine's voice cuts like steel. "That higher office was your campaign headquarters, Mr. Trump. You intervened not to protect justice, but to protect a predator and yourself." Reporters gasp. Phones light up. Outside, the chants swell into a frenzy. "Read it. Read it." Jasmine obliges, turning another page. This time, the document lists names judges, prosecutors, even cabinet officials who received direct pressure to defer, delay, or destroy evidence. Trump's name appears again, underlined in bold strokes, circled in red ink. Trump slams his hand on the table. "Lies," he bellows, his voice cracking. That the room is no longer his, senators avert their eyes. Some whisper to aides, others clutch papers as if they might shield them from the fallout. The nation is watching, and the power is shifting. Jasmine leans closer, her voice dropping low, almost intimate, the kind of tone that forces every ear to strain. For decades, you pretended to be untouchable. But these files, these words prove you've always been a puppet of corruption, hiding behind mobsters, using fear to bend the law. The truth is no longer sealed. The binder slams shut with a crack that echoes like a gavel. The cameras hold on Trump's face, sweat dripping, lips trembling, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. Outside, the crowd surges, chanting Jasmine's name as though history has already shifted. And then, Jasmine asks the question that slices deeper than any accusation, her voice calm, unflinching, merciless. If this is what you did in the shadows, Mr. Trump, what horrors are still hidden in the dark? The binder still gleamed under the harsh Capitol lights when Jasmine rose again, her voice steady but sharp as glass. She didn't need theatrics now, the evidence had spoken. What she offered next was worse than any memo, more damning than any signature. It was a blueprint, a chilling pattern that stretched from the smoke-filled rooms of the New York Mafia to the Oval Office itself. Donald Trump, she began, pacing slowly across the chamber, her heels clicking like the ticks of a clock, didn't invent corruption. He inherited it, studied it, perfected it. The mob was his first classroom, and their lessons: intimidate your rivals, pay off the law, silence anyone who dares to speak. She held up a grainy black-and-white photo, John Gotti, smirking in a tailored suit. Then, side by side, a younger Trump outside Trump Tower, flashing the same smile, the smug curve of a man who believes the rules were written for other people. This is not coincidence, Jasmine said, her voice slicing through the air. This is mimicry. This is apprenticeship. The chamber bristled, senators exchanged uneasy glances. Reporters scribbled furiously, and the gallery leaned forward as though pulled by invisible strings. Jasmine pressed harder. She read out cases where union bosses were bought with luxury condos, inspectors bribed with briefcases of cash, journalists silenced with threats of lawsuits that would bury them in debt. Every move was straight out of the Mafia playbook, and every move bore Trump's fingerprints. Trump growled from his seat, his face red, but Jasmine didn't stop. She leaned into the microphone, her voice low and deliberate. John Gotti had soldiers in the streets. Donald Trump had executives in boardrooms. Gotti broke legs, Trump broke livelihoods. Different weapons, same empire of fear. A chill swept the room. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, their red lights flickering as if wary of capturing truths too explosive for air. Outside, the chants of Mafia, Mafia, bled into the chamber's walls like a war drum. Jasmine's words weren't just accusations anymore, they were an indictment written in history's ink. And then came the emotional drop, her voice wavered, not in weakness but in raw honesty. For decades, America told itself corruption was the exception, but what if it's the foundation? What if every tower built on this soil carries concrete mixed with silence, blood, and lies? Her eyes swept across the chamber, heavy with the despair of a nation staring into its own reflection. How many children, families, workers paid the price while power bowed to the Mafia code? The silence that followed was suffocating, a pause so thick it pressed against the ribs. Trump shifted, his hands twitching, searching for words, but none came. The room wasn't his anymore, it belonged to the truth. Jasmine closed her binder, but not her argument. Her voice dropped into a blade's edge, the final cut no one could look away from. If America allows its presidents to govern by the Mafia blueprint, then the White House is no longer a house of the people, it is just another crime family's headquarters. For the first time that day, Donald Trump had no words. The man who thrived on no's, who weaponized insults like bullets, sat rigid in his chair as the Capitol chamber dissolved into an unnatural stillness. His lips parted, then pressed shut, his jaw tightened, then quivered. Cameras zoomed in, broadcasting to every living room in America, not a storm of bluster but a voice, a silence that stretched like a blade across the throat of his power. 20 seconds, that's all it was, 20 ticks of the clock. But in those 20 seconds the world seemed to fracture. Senators held their breath, unsure if they were witnessing hesitation or collapse. Aides glanced nervously at each other, whispering without sound. Outside, the roar of protesters chanting Mafia, Mafia, cut through the air but could not penetrate the chamber. Inside, it was as if the oxygen itself had frozen. Trump's fingers drummed on the desk, desperate for rhythm, for control, for the old swagger that once bulldozed opposition. But nothing came. His eyes darted from Jasmine to the documents, then to the crowd of cameras pointed at him like firing squads. Every second he failed to speak was another sec, and the myth of invincibility drained away. The man who built an empire on fear now looked afraid. Jasmine didn't move, she didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She simply stood, spine straight, gaze steady, letting the silence do what words never could. She understood power. Sometimes the most devastating strike is not another accusation, but forcing your enemy to reveal the hollow beneath their mask. The silence became a mirror, and in it, America saw not a boss but a cornered man, stripped of the only weapon he'd ever known: intimidation. News tickers began flashing the seconds in real time. Trump silent, 5 South, 10s, 15s, anchors on live networks leaned forward, stunned, filling dead air with whispers. Is he frozen? Has he lost his grip? Millions watched, not blinking, sensing history tilting in real time. The chamber itself became an echo chamber, amplifying not sound but absence, until the weight of that void pressed on every chest in the nation. At second 19, Trump leaned forward as though to speak, but his throat caught. A shallow exhale escaped, almost a gasp, before he slumped back into his chair. By second 20, the spell was complete. The Emperor's roar had dissolved into silence, and that silence screamed louder than anything he had ever said. Jasmine broke it not with volume, but with precision. Her voice was low, deliberate, measured like a verdict. What happens when a man built on fear finally meets someone he cannot scare? The words hung in the air like a gavel strike. The chamber didn't erupt, it imploded, absorbing the shock of a moment that would be replayed for generations, and in that instant, the story shifted. It was no longer about Trump's empire of fear, it was about its unraveling, beginning with 20 seconds of silence that shook the foundations of America. The silence had broken him. 20 seconds of paralysis had carved cracks into Donald Trump's armor. And now those cracks split open in real time, live before the eyes of a nation. His face, flushed crimson, twisted with fury. Veins bulged at his temples, and his fists slammed against the desk, rattling the microphones. Then came the eruption, a torrent of rage so unfiltered, so venomous, it felt less like the voice of a president and more like the howl of a wounded beast. "You're a traitor," he roared, spittle flying as the camera zoomed in mercilessly. "You're nothing but a witch, a nobody, a disgrace to this chamber." His words collided with each other, incoherent, vulgar, each insult louder than the last. The chamber gasped, stunned not by his usual swaggering bravado, but by the naked desperation in his tone. This was not strategy, this was collapse. He jabbed a finger toward Jasmine, his hand trembling, his voice cracking between shouts. "You think you can take me down? You are just another angry black woman, screaming in the dark, begging for attention." The words, drenched in venom, echoed off the chamber walls like a confession of hate laid bare. Senators shifted uncomfortably, some shaking their heads, others lowering their eyes, as if ashamed of what they were witnessing. Jasmine did not flinch, she stood still, her silence an unyielding wall against his fury. The more he hurled at her, the smaller he seemed, not a titan of politics, but a man unraveling under the weight of his own fear. Social media feeds lit up in real time. Hashtag Trump meltdown, hashtag unhinged president, hashtag Crockett strong. Clips of his face red, contorted, sweating flooded the digital sphere within seconds. Millions watching at home recoiled, some in horror, others in vindication, as the image of invincibility he had curated for decades shattered into dust. "Traitor," he bellowed again, voice breaking, throat raw. He slammed both fists on the desk, the microphone screeching with feedback, the sound tearing into speakers across America. "You're nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing." The fury no longer carried dominance, it carried panic, like a man screaming into the dark to convince himself he wasn't afraid. For a moment, the chamber was chaos, gavel pounding, aides rushing to calm the storm, senators murmuring in disbelief. But amid the noise, a chilling realization settled over the room. The mask had slipped. The strong man who had built his empire on intimidation had exposed himself as fragile, cornered, terrified of losing control. Jasmine finally stepped forward, her voice calm, measured, slicing through his tirade like a scalpel. "A man who calls others nothing," she said, her tone unwavering, "has already confessed the emptiness inside himself." Trump froze, his mouth open, his rage momentarily suspended. The chamber hushed once more, But this time the silence didn't belong to him, it belonged to her. And across America, millions whispered the same unspoken question: had the boss of fear just destroyed himself on live television? The chamber was still trembling from Trump's meltdown when Jasmine Crockett took a single step forward. Not a rush, not a stumble, but a deliberate move, like a soldier advancing on a battlefield she already owned. The gavel pounded again and again, but the sound was swallowed by the silence that followed her. Eyes locked on her. Millions through screens, thousands in the gallery waiting. Then came her voice, sharp as steel and steady as stone. "I am nothing," she repeated, her gaze never breaking. "No, I am everything you fear. I cannot be bought. I cannot be broken." The chamber erupted, gasps, applause, a roar building like thunder trapped inside marble walls. Trump flinched, ever so slightly, as if the words themselves struck harder than any insult he had thrown. His body leaned back, shoulders stiffening, and for the first time that night, he looked small. The cameras caught at the shrinking of a man once untouchable. Jasmine pressed forward, her figure illuminated by the harsh white lights, her voice carrying with a resonance that felt almost biblical. "You built your empire on silence, intimidation, and greed. But here I stand, unafraid. And the people you call nothing, they are everything. The mothers who buried children because of your cruelty. The workers stripped of dignity, the voices you tried to erase. Tonight, those voices rise with me." The crowd outside the Capitol picked up the words almost instantly, chanting, echoing them through the streets. "We cannot be bought. We cannot be broken." Hashtags exploded across the digital sphere, images of her standing defiant against a man unraveling plastered on every phone, every feed. Trump tried to interject, his lips curling into another insult, but no sound carried weight anymore. Every attempt at interruption was drowned by the noise swelling around him, the chants, the clapping, the thundering rhythm of a nation no longer willing to cower. He sat there, face rigid, as Jasmine's presence loomed larger, towering not in physical height, but in moral gravity. She was no longer a minor congresswoman, she was a symbol, a blade sharpened by years of injustice, now pointed directly at him. She leaned in just enough, her words laced with fire. "You call me nothing because deep down, you know I am the one thing you cannot control. The truth, and the truth will bury your empire of lies." The chamber quaked with applause, senators rising from their seats, some reluctantly, others with tears glinting in their eyes. The sound was deafening, not the noise of politics, but of history folding in on itself, marking the moment when fear ceded ground to defiance. Trump sat motionless, his hands gripping the desk as if it might anchor him from being swept away. His lips moved but no sound emerged, drowned beneath the roar that belonged not to him, but to her. And as the camera closed in on Jasmine's face, her eyes ablaze with unshaken resolve, America realized it was no longer watching a debate, it was witnessing the birth of a warrior. The echo of Jasmine's words still rattled the chamber when the numbers began to pour in. Networks cut to giant digital walls where poll numbers flashed like lightning across the screen. Just hours earlier, Trump had clung to a fragile majority of Republican loyalty, but now, state after state flipped in real time. Wisconsin, gone. Arizona, gone. Even Florida lawn his fortress registered a stunning reversal. The headline blazed in red. 57% of Americans now say Trump unfit to serve. For the first time in years, the myth of his untouchable grip was fracturing before the eyes of millions. Outside, the chants swelled louder, no longer scattered slogans but unified thunder. Cardboard signs, hastily scribbled with black paint, waved through the air. No Mafia president. Justice over fear. And above all, one phrase that electrified the streets: #Crockett the truth. Within minutes, the hashtag trended worldwide, climbing past sports finals and celebrity scandals, overtaking every platform. The world was no longer just watching America. It was watching Jasmine Crockett redefine it. In living rooms from Detroit to Dallas, retirees sat stunned, whispering to spouses that they'd never seen a president unravel like this. In college dorms, students streamed clips of Jasmine's words, replaying the moment she declared herself unbreakable. The country was split between rage and relief, but one thing was undeniable: fear had shifted sides. Trump was no longer the intimidator, he was the man under siege. Back in the chamber, Trump's face flushed crimson as aides slipped him notes he didn't bother to read. He shouted about witch hunts, traitors, conspiracies, but the more he raged, the more the cameras captured the cracks in his armor. His voice, once booming, now sounded strained, desperate. Beside him, allies avoided eye contact, their silence louder than any applause. Some shifted uncomfortably, others buried their faces in papers, as if to distance themselves from a sinking ship. And Jasmine, she stood calm, hands clasped, watching as the tide she had unleashed rolled across the nation. Every insult Trump hurled now bounced back against him like ricochets from a broken gun. She didn't need to speak again, the people were speaking for her. By evening, aerial shots showed millions marching coast to coast. From New York's Times Square to the steps of the Texas Capitol, the chant was the same, rhythmic, relentless. No Mafia president. No Mafia president. It was no longer just protest. It was indictment by the people themselves. Yet amid the roar of revolution, a chilling question lingered. Tower this entrenched does not vanish overnight, and shadows this dark do not dissolve in a single broadcast. The poll numbers were damning, the streets alive with fury, but history had warned America before strongmen rarely go quietly. As the cameras zoom in one last time, capturing Jasmine's unflinching stare against Trump's trembling silence, the narrator's voice cut through with a final, haunting note. But is this the end of Trump or just another chapter in America's endless struggle with power? When the cameras finally dimmed and the chants outside the Capitol became a distant echo, Jasmine Crockett found herself alone in a small side chamber, the heavy oak door muffling the chaos of history still raging beyond its frame. She leaned against the table, breath steady but eyes burning with the weight of what had just unfolded. For a fleeting moment, silence reigned, not the silence of fear that Trump had always commanded, but the rare silence of clarity. She'd whispered to herself, not as a congresswoman seeking the spotlight, but as a woman who had carried generations of voices into that chamber. This was never about me, she thought. This was about the people who never get to speak back. Her mind replayed faces she met on campaign trails and courthouse steps, the black mother holding eviction papers with one hand and her child's hand with the other, the immigrant father weeping as his daughter was deported, the steelworker in Ohio whose job was outsourced while billionaires toasted champagne. They were not footnotes in policy papers, they were the lifeblood of the democracy Trump had tried to twist into his personal empire. For a moment, despair flickered. Could one voice, however fierce, hold back decades of rot? She remembered the threats, the smear campaigns, the death threats whispered into her voicemail. But then another image rose, millions marching, hashtags surging, chants shaking the marble steps of power. The fight was bigger than her fear. It always had been. She straightened her jacket, squared her shoulders, and let the thought settle in her chest like steel. She was not battling for her name, but for the promise that no citizen, black, brown, poor, or silenced, would ever again be told their life was expendable. Her strength did not come from her seat in Congress. It came from standing on the unbroken spine of a people who had endured worse and still demanded justice. As she stepped back into the hallway, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, allies whispered strategies, but Jasmine walked with a stillness that cut through the frenzy. She was no longer just Jasmine Crockett, the minor congresswoman Trump had tried to belittle. She was something far more dangerous to men like him, a symbol no insult could erase, no mafia could buy, no fear could bend. And as the crowd parted, all eyes fixed on her, she realized the truest battle was not whether Trump would fall but whether America would finally rise. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as Jasmine Crockett turned from the chaos of politicians and reporters to face the unblinking eye of the camera. Her voice, low at first, cut through the static of history. America, will you kneel before a mob boss or will you stand with justice? For a moment, the air seemed to fracture. Viewers across the nation leaned closer to their screens. In living rooms, diners, hospital waiting rooms, millions held their breath. The camera zoomed in, catching the fire in her eyes, the tight line of her jaw, the steel in her stance. Behind her, even seasoned lawmakers, men and women who had spent decades drowning in Washington cynicism, sat frozen, as though they too were hearing something that reached beyond politics and straight into the marrow of the nation's soul. Some spectators in the gallery wiped their eyes. A veteran clutched his cap to his chest, a young woman whispered, "Finally." Someone said it. Jasmine didn't waver. She spoke of the mothers who had lost children to cages, of workers who had watched their factories shutter, of voices silenced because they threat and the power of one man. Democracy is not a game show. It is not for sale. It is not a throne for a coward who hides behind wealth and fear. It belongs to you. Each word landed like a hammer, breaking chains unseen. The Capitol chamber seemed to pulse, alive with the electricity of something long dormant. Belief. Belief that truth could still rise louder than lies, that courage could still cut through corruption. And as her words echoed into living rooms, bars, and crowded streets, America was forced to confront a question that could no longer be ignored. Not whether Jasmine Crockett would stand, but whether the people themselves still had the courage to rise. The chamber had turned into a theater of reckoning. Jasmine Crockett stood beneath the dome lights, her voice carrying like a final verdict carved into stone. Trump may think he is a mafia boss, but America is stronger than fear. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the scene shifted into a sweeping montage. Streets filled with protesters waving banners, "No Mafia President," chants echoing like drumbeats of defiance. Families locked arm in arm outside shuttered factories. College students raising fists in unity. Veterans saluting beneath storm-gray skies. The movement no longer belonged to one woman, it belonged to millions. The camera panned across faces: black, white, Latino, Asian, native workers in hard hats, mothers with strollers, elders holding handwritten signs trembling in the wind. Together, they formed a living wall of resistance, proof that solidarity was more powerful than intimidation. Hashtags blazed across social media like wildfire. Hashtag Crockett the truth. Hashtag rise together. Hashtag no mafia politics. The nation, fractured for so long, now pulsed with a rhythm it had nearly forgotten. Hope. Jasmine's final words fell like a challenge to history itself. The question is not whether Trump is finished. The question is, will we rise together to finish what he started? Her eyes locked with the lens, unflinching, as though staring straight into every living room, every diner, every heart that still beat for democracy. And as the screen faded to black, the echo of her voice lingered like a drum in the distance, daring America to answer. Comment below. Do you believe America can break free from its mafia politics? At its heart, this story is not just about politics, it's about courage in the face of intimidation. Jasmine reminds us that silence feeds corruption, but truth, spoken boldly, can ignite a nation. In our own lives, whether at work, in family, or within our communities, we are faced with moments where fear tempts us to stay quiet. But history belongs to those who rise. To fight for justice begins with small acts of bravery. When fear knocks at your door, will you choose silence or will you rise and speak your truth? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.